In the fall season of 2007, an anime series would be produced that would arguably become the most popular hidden gem recommendation I have ever seen. Perhaps paradoxically, it would turn up on seemingly every one of those top lists that attempt to highlight the very best unknown anime that have yet to be discovered by the core community. That anime, which I am tempted to even call a household name by now, was none other than Kaiji. Everybody's favorite suspenseful gambling anime with high stakes, lots of smart strategies and tactics, a great soundtrack and of course, with smart writing, keeping you on the edge of your seat, that even partially inspired the highly popular live-action TV series Squid Game, it was only a matter of time that it got the recognition it deserved and a place in my list of my favorite anime of all time. What makes this success story rather depressing though, is that an earlier and very similar series will probably forever stay in its big brother's giant shadow. That series is the true hidden gem Akagi. In large part, these two animes seem almost identical. Both are TV series named after their protagonist, that feature the unique pointy art style with lots of edgy goodness, and both are about intense gambling and even share some games. Both are produced by the same animation studio, Studio Madhouse, in the mid-2000s, as well as directed by the very same director with soundtracks from the very same composer. And finally, both were adapted from 90s manga written and illustrated by Nobuyuki Fukumoto that he was working on for several decades. So why did Akagi fly under the radar compared to Kaiji, especially in the West? Well, one word: Mahjong. Now, if you don't know what that means, then congratulations. You have just experienced why Akagi is so unpopular, at least overseas. You see, while Akagi is about gambling, just like its brethren, the vehicle for that is almost always Mahjong, a tile-based board game originating from China. And compared to the variety of unique games you find in Kaiji, that does sound rather boring and, well, foreign. What many don't know, however, is that Kaiji later also becomes mostly a one-game show, which isn't that of a surprise considering its mangaka's trademark and forte is in fact Mahjong. His 3 longest works are about that very topic, and most of his manga were even published in the specialized Kindai Mahjong magazine, instead of the, traditional ones like Shonen Jump and whatnot. So if you think about it, Kaiji is the odd one out really. But let's address the elephant in the room. You can't play Mahjong, so why should you care? This is the very question I asked myself the first time around. After all, it's not exactly a simple game you can pick up in like an hour or two, so why invest such an effort just to watch a show? Naturally, I went in completely blind, not even looking up the rough concept of the game, and surprise! It actually didn't matter. Because as previously mentioned, Mahjong only serves as a tool for the narrative. It could rather easily be replaced by many other board games and it wouldn't change all that much. And just to prove a point, the second time I watched Akagi, I actually learned as much Mahjong as I could, studying the basic flow of the game, all the tiles it uses, the essential rules almost all variations share, the different hands you can have, etc. I even practiced on this weird anime-fied website called Mahjong Soul just to get a good feel for it. And truth be told, it didn't enhance the overall experience in a super significant way. Sure, it does help when you know what all these complicated terms such as pon or richi mean the characters constantly shout, or what tile someone is waiting for before it gets made obvious by the narrator when it finally appears, but suspension, plot comprehension and even enjoyment all stayed pretty much the same nonetheless. So don't worry about it. It's not as much as a game breaker as you think it is. It even helps immersion not knowing much about Mahjong at first, because our main character also starts from zero. That said, he doesn't stay clueless for long and Akagi never makes a good attempt at explaining all the rules of the game itself, so a really basic conceptual overview of Mahjong doesn't hurt. So, just for the record, Mahjong is a traditional Chinese tile-based board game that originated in the 19th century. Yeah, it's actually a pretty recent invention, though in this case it's Richi Mahjong, the Japanese variation for obvious reasons. Anyway, it almost always involves 4 players as well as a good amount of strategy and skill, but also luck. As a player you have a hand, a set of tiles, and each turn you draw a tile from the deck in the middle and then discard one tile from your hand that other players can then use to their advantage. I always think of it as a strange mix of 4-player Uno and Scrabble, if that helps you. And in my honest opinion, that is all you really need to be aware of when watching the 26 episodes of this anime, and you could probably get by much less, like I did back then. Alright, now Akagi may be about Mahjong, but also not really. We'll get to that. For now, let's first take a look at the story. So Akagi starts off in 1958 post-war Japan with, lo and behold, a Mahjong game between some guy in debt and some Yakuza. At some point the door opens and some 13-year-old kid named Akagi enters the room, who just escaped death after playing a game of chicken. The Yakuza want him out immediately, but the indebted man covers for him because he needs a break after a huge losing streak. Believing his fate is already sealed anyway, the man takes on the advice of Akagi to play more offensively and not just to survive, which rewards him with a win at last. Shocked by that development, the man now asks Akagi to play in his stead, explaining the essentials of Mahjong within a measly 5 minutes. The rest he would learn along the way. Shortly after, the police arrive searching for a participant of the deadly game of chicken Akagi played before, but both the man and the Yakuza end up covering for him, though a detective stays for the night just to make sure. Akagi later turns out to be the winner, which impresses everyone in the room, including the corrupt police detective who also happens to be a big fan of Mahjong and who now sees Akagi as a way to make money. Following that fateful match, Akagi enters the underworld, gambling his way through from paycheck to paycheck, playing against Yakuza representatives as well as other powerful players in order to find that one true deathmatch to end it all. So as you can imagine, this anime isn't merely about some family-friendly Mahjong matches to win a bit of prize money or trophies, but more often than not about surviving and ruling the underworld. On the agenda there is always someone betting their whole life savings, body parts, be it finger or arm, or even straight up their life. These kinds of high stakes help keep the anime interesting, especially considering all of that is mostly decided through seemingly lame Mahjong matches. Another reason the tension is kept so high despite the underlying game is that these matches get switched up from time to time. Like when your opponent is a blind man and you need to shout your moves, or you play with mostly transparent tiles, which completely changes the way you normally play. Many strategies and tactics at your disposal in other games, that by the way can take a whole episode to explain, are also present in Mahjong, of course. Bluffing is a big thing, as is putting on a poker face. Decoys are often utilized as well, same as intentionally making irrational or accidental moves to throw off your opponents. In addition, while the games are mostly depicted as a duel between Akagi and whoever he's facing off against, the two NPC characters, so to say, that play along may also be used to one's advantage. And when nothing else helps, the players will try to manipulate each other through psychological pressure, or they will straight up cheat to get an edge. Then there are the bystanders, who often serve as the audience thinking about what the next possible moves will be. Through inner monologues, they amplify the viewer's thoughts, help to comprehend what is currently happening through fitting descriptions, and help make situations even more dramatic than they already are. The ever-present narrator helps as well, of course, with comments like,
Akagi was ready to face death when you discarded those two tiles.
And last but not least, the directing and imagery of the anime can be commended as well, since they managed to enhance the overall experience even more. But perhaps the real highlight of the anime is Akagi himself, a cunning, manipulative and mysterious young man who appeared out of nowhere and takes on the depths of the underworld in search for a true deathmatch. Even as a 13-year-old boy, he has participated in some life-threatening games that only get crazier and more insane later on, like literally paying with his blood instead of traditional points. He is often threatened by his previous opponents who lost against him, but he knows how to fight and intimidate others just as effectively as he plays games. He's obviously amazing at whatever game he picks up, defeating master opponents after learning the basics of Mahjong within a few minutes with an unorthodox and unpredictable, but at the same time always adapting playstyle to match his opponents 2 steps ahead. It doesn't even matter when his opponent gets an unfair advantage. In fact, that crushes them even more when they eventually lose against him, which is why Akagi usually accepts when the odds are completely stacked against him. That's just how confident he is. To the point of leaving the game early with his last remaining tile face down, knowing he would win the match no matter his opponent's moves. He's also great at waging his opponents against each other. This is perfectly illustrated by his very first match, where he holds 3 parties all at once in the palm of his hand. First, when the police arrives to take him in, he makes a deal with the losing man to save him from his debts when he covers for him. Second, he cheats, which the Yakuza guys notice but can't do anything about because the police is watching. And third, the police has nothing on him because the other 2 parties cover for him as they don't want the police snooping around. And having just mentioned cheating, Akagi does it mostly when he steps in for someone else on a huge losing streak to get some headroom or when his opponents cheated first. Otherwise, he plays by the rules as much as possible. And finally, Akagi doesn't care about money, fame or losing his own life, but he always insists on his opponents to wager something that would let him absolutely destroy them as well, be it reputation, life savings or life itself. If the participants, including his allies, don't have anything to lose, he won't play. On top of that, he always pushes for more and higher stakes. Lost a finger just now? Why not bet an arm next? And through his manipulation efforts, he almost always gets his way, forcing his conditions on his opponents. When it comes to the other characters, most of them stay in the background and leave the spotlight to Akagi. The only interesting side characters are Akagi's main opponents, who seem equally clever and insane at first, only to get outclassed by Akagi in a devastating way. This is unfortunately also where the negatives begin. Akagi is mostly, well, about Akagi, who by choice of narrative doesn't get any development whatsoever, and the rest of the cast is largely uninteresting. At times coming off as monsters of the week, so to say, that are defeated again and again by Akagi, who never loses even once, which makes the anime predictable in that sense. But then again, seeing how Akagi manages to get out of these dire situations is interesting enough to keep your attention. That said, especially the two non-named players necessarily participating in the matches make Mahjong an awkward choice for depicting duels. And Mahjong itself, well, even after learning it to some degree, has not exactly become my favorite game when it comes to gambling. It does fit in this context, but I very much prefer the variety of games played in Kaiji. In Akagi, however, it's always Mahjong, even with some variation and a few cameos of other games like dice rolling, game of chicken and Russian roulette. And then there's the fact that Mahjong, while also involving lots of skill, is luck-based when getting your starting hand as well as the tiles you draw. There are more than a few situations where you get a heart of the cards moment, so if you can't suspend your disbelief that far, then that's something to be prepared for. Though they do attempt to depict it in such a way that it almost becomes rule of cool. Almost. And lastly, the anime adaptation ends abruptly in the middle of nowhere, during the biggest game yet, and then has the audacity to spoil the whole thing with a time skip. Speaking of time skips, this series has a lot of them for some reason. First a 6-year time skip followed by a 1-year one, and finally ending with over 30 years of off-screen events. On the other side of the coin, this makes Akagi highly focused, skipping the fluff and only showing what it absolutely wants to show, the Mahjong games. Seriously, it immediately starts with a 3-episode long Mahjong game and is never interrupted by more than 2 episodes in between each match, that grow longer and longer. So long in fact that the anime stops in the very middle of one. Overall, Akagi is pretty good. It may not have the fame, the game variety or the character development of its sibling Kaiji, but it features the same thrill, suspense and intensity we all know and love. With an additional fun main character, a unique art style and a soundtrack composed by none other than Hideki Taniyuchi, who also composed for Kaiji and even Death Note, and is blacklisted from the industry for smoking weed by the way, Akagi is definitely worth a watch, especially if you enjoyed Kaiji. And just to clarify once again, no, you don't need to learn Mahjong to watch this anime. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, I'd always appreciate a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, don't hesitate to subscribe. Have you already seen Kaiji or even play Mahjong yourself? Let me know in the comments. Have a great day and I'll see you guys in the next video.